And this is our webinar that Rafa and I had scheduled for today. And Rafa's one of our veteran warriors, as am I. And I can tell you that it doesn't matter how many days, months, years you are into TSW. Talking to somebody who's been going through it, has been there, done that, is always refreshing. So I think for those of you that were signed up for the webinar, hopefully you'll see the recording if we had kind of a late start. So if you missed that registration link, don't worry about it. You can just watch it here on Facebook, and we'll of course share it up on our website as well, ITSAN.org. But before we start, I always just want to give the disclosure for people just to remember that everything Rafa and I talk about is really based on personal experience. Of course, our mission and our purpose is to always support anybody that walks into the world of ITSAN, into Topical Steroid Withdrawal Syndrome, and discovers that they need some help in this area. So please take all suggestions, recommendations, all of our experience, and I don't think there's a condition more like topical steroid withdrawal where you kind of know what you need to do for yourself, and you're always willing to take new suggestions, and you're always open to anything that's out there. So please just have an open mind, and if you have questions, go ahead and ask, and if we don't answer them right now, we'll be sure to get to them. But like I said, having veterans before you to talk about this condition is always a treat. I know when I got started many years ago, there just weren't very many people who had been very long and far into this journey. So to have people around that can show you there is a way through, there is a way out, is always really helpful and hopeful. So Rafa, before we get started, I know I interviewed you like a year ago.
Yeah, almost exactly like a year ago.
Yes, I was going to say it was very much about a year ago. So it's awesome. I'm so glad you reached out to me to kind of catch up on how you're doing, because we also know in this world of TSW that many people kind of go in and go out and heal and go on their way. We don't hear back from them. So last time when we talked, you were talking about no moisture treatment. And so today we're going to talk about something totally different, but will you just kind of give us the background on your journey, how many years you've been into withdrawals, and then I've got some questions for you, because I'm sure you're wondering, why is he back? So just kind of give us the rundown on your
so basically when I was 12, I started getting eczema, and then it's kind of like a similar story for a lot of people. Started with some steroids, and then more and more, eventually higher potency, and kind of what I talked in the previous time. Eventually I got to a point where it didn't work, and then in 2017, like towards the end of 2017 is when I just decided to go cold turkey, just stopping to use steroids. And I decided to do that. But since I was in school, I kind of wanted to get over it as soon as I could. So I started researching different methods. Is what led me to NMT. Is why I did it. And if you're interested in that, you can go look at the other video, which is when I talk about that. So after that, I was very well, and that's when I had my interview with Molly right here. And I was doing really well. I think I just had like a crusty spot on my cheek at that point. And that happened because I knew that eventually I needed to go back to Minnesota and finish my master's. I still needed one more semester. So I had gone back that summer after being almost 100% just to see how my body will react, because there's something about the Minnesota weather, something up there that's kind of made my TSW worse. So I kind of wanted to do like a small trip before I decided to go back and finish my semester to just see how it would go. And I was in Minnesota for about 2 weeks, and then I started to get my flare again, and then that's when I decided it wasn't worth it to stay. That's when I came back. I had my interview with you. I kind of was able to control it. I slowly got better and better until around December. Around July, around the same time, that's when I found that I had funding for me to finish in the spring semester of, will that be this year? Oh, yeah, of spring 2020, yeah. So by December, that's when I was fairly well. I was like 80% slowly getting better, but then I had to go back to Minnesota to finish my master's. So I went back, and then things started to get worse again. but not nearly as fast as the first time. So I could tell that my skin was stronger because I did get a flare, but it wasn't as bad. It slowly got worse. It wasn't like a thing that just got worse really fast. So I kind of just wanted to deal with it. I didn't want to go into NMT again, just because last time I went into NMT is kind of how I explained in the last video. It's really fast. You can get bad pretty fast, but then, so it's kind of like so that works in a way that the symptoms kind of get amplified, but you also should only see it for a small amount of time. So that's why at that point in time, I didn't want to do NMT again, because I knew I was going to be going to school. And yes, at that point in time, I also didn't want to deal with that. I don't think I could deal with that and going back to school at the same time. So that's why I decided not to do NMT at that moment. And by not doing that, I think I also experienced kind of like the flare at a slower pace. And that's what allowed me to be in school for a longer time. But by around March, kind of like when the whole COVID thing started to blow up and then school started to shut down, I was actually getting pretty bad. I got it on my foot pretty bad, which had never happened before. And I think that's because of the friction from walking with the shoe on. So that's something different that I knew I hadn't done before, because before with the NMT, I was kind of just isolated, bedridden for the longest time. So that's something different that I noticed. So eventually I couldn't walk as well, but then that's kind of like the silver lining of COVID. That's when the school decided to shut down. I was able to come back. And then I decided to also try something different since I wasn't doing NMT. I started to go to an acupuncturist, and I started doing traditional Chinese medicine. I also wanted to do that just because doing NMT and just being in a lot of different pages, a lot of people just kind of look for different methods, and then people kind of just decide to go one, and then the people that do a different method say, oh, this is the one that works, this is the one that worked for me. So I kind of just wanted to see if different methods could work for one person. That's also why I decided to do that.
I have questions for you.
Yep.
So you're about 3 years into TSW?
Yeah, so I'm the kind of person that I don't really follow like this is day one that I started. Yeah. So about 2.5, 3 years, yeah. I think at the end of 2017, it was when I started doing it, yeah. Okay,
so, well, Rafa, I will say to that, I don't know if that's just the kind of person you are, but I will tell you that I think with TSW and all the, really the trauma and PTSD we get with it, I'm like, I don't know. I don't remember dates. I'm like, when was that? When did I do this? So it's like 7 years, 8 years. I don't even really know. But I think that's part of our own, survival mechanism in our body. But what I wanted to ask you is, you stopped using steroids. Had you already heard of topical steroid withdrawal, or did you stop using steroids that first time in 2017 just as like, this isn't working anymore?
No, actually in 2017, it just didn't make sense to me anymore that steroids weren't like doing what they were supposed to. And then that's when I started Googling myself. Okay. Googling myself, because I mean, it just didn't make sense. And that's when I found ITSAN. That's when I found all the group. So I think before that, just like a lot of other people, we just trust the doctors, just assume that what we're being given is what's going to work, and there's nothing else out there. But I think we all get to the point where it's like, this just makes no sense. And that's when you start Googling and looking for things. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's,
it's always good to hear how we get started. Cause I think, it seems like it's always a cold turkey method, but it's usually not the dermatologist told me to quit using steroids. It's usually, it's usually, you need higher methods. So, okay, now we need to do injections. So it's also me refusing to do, I think the next step for me, so I was on clobetasol, just the lotion one, cream one. And I think the next step for me was getting injections. But since my mom is a general doctor in Mexico, she knew that once you go systemic, that affects kind of everything. So that's kind of like the line that we always drew, that if it got to that point, maybe we should be looking at something else. And that's also why I decided to look into other things. Yeah. So the last time we talked, you did NMT. My question for you is, you had seen such great results with NMT. And again, it's one of those treatment decisions that You know, of all the different treatment options that are out there, NMT seems to be the one, like you said, when you go into it, it's very, very hard. You can get very, very fast escalation in the condition. And so it's one to be done with support and with guidance and a clear understanding of what to expect when you go into that. But so my hope for you was that you were like done and healed, because you really kind of went into this very, very tough method. So you said you went back to Minnesota, and the whatever is in the weather there, the air there, which is interesting because since I've come from Arizona to Indiana, closer to Minnesota, you know, in the Midwest, my skin's been much worse. And so I always just, you know, I'm trying to figure it out too. Like, what is it? I feel like in Arizona, I used to go, like, I'd have a flare, then I'd come out for a longer period of time. Here, it's been like, I've been in a, I don't really call it a flare anymore, but my skin has not been great since March. And it just kind of stays like that. Like, it doesn't really come out. But when you went back to Minnesota, do you consider what you're going through at that point and now TSW, or do you think you just have residual eczema, a lifelong condition that's just going to be there? What do you call this condition at this point?
So I think all of this time, especially for me being such a long time user with such high potency, I think TSW, so I think this is another important thing. As I go on more time, I'm kind of like switching my thinking about what TSW is, what it does, that kind of stuff. So I think all this time I am going through TSW. I think even right now, even though I look really well, I mean, if you see me in the street, you can't really tell that anything's going on. But I think we're still going through TSW. And I think eventually we are going to get over it, especially those long-time users. I think eventually, yeah, we're going to get there. But I think it's just always going to be there, and our body's slowly just going back to balance, hormones, all that kind of stuff. So I think I'm still fairly off of it, being 3 years, just with the amount of times I was 12, I was really high potency. So I think I'm still going to have some time left. Yeah. And with NMT and these different methods, something that I know about NMT this past year that I hadn't talked about with you last year is that NMT, all of these different methods, I don't think they're going to heal TSW. They're not going to heal that thing that we just have to get through. NMT, these different methods, I think what they do is that they're just get you over a specific flare. And I think that's what NMT did for me for my first flare. And then I got really well. And then going back to Minnesota, there was something about over there, the weather, maybe the humidity, or maybe mold, something that just it's up there, not down here, that made another flare come up. Mm-hmm. So at that point, you will just adopt NMT or another different method to get over that flare. I think eventually that flare wasn't as bad as my first flare, which was really horrible. It still got pretty bad, but not as bad. So I think while we go through TSW, we're going to be cycling through different flares, and then we're going to be using these different methods that we have at our disposal to get over that flare so we can come back and be at a manageable place.
Right.
But I do think eventually we are not going to, the flares are going to be slower and slower, and then it's going to be kind of just eczema, and then I think we're going to be fine eventually.
Yeah, so I love that. I'll buy that any day because I feel like I'm kind of at that stage right now where there's not a lot left, but what is left, it does not feel like TSW at all in the beginning. And I think that's one of the questions a lot of our members have is like, how do you know when you're healing? Like, how do you know? And that's the only way I can ever explain it is your flares just get so much less severe and the big symptoms go away, you know? So when you were in Minnesota and you went back into a new flare, what came back? Because like you said, it wasn't as bad as the first flare. So what came back? Like for me, I can say with each flare, I don't go back to like, you know, the main symptoms of oozing and, you know, the really bad stuff doesn't come back. I still get my sleep. All of those things stay pretty normal. But what came back for you? Like how bad was this flare?
Yeah. So I think the biggest problem that I had was that I had to go back to Minnesota before I was kind of like 100% my skin back to normal. So I still had like some places like on my hands, like here you can see that it's a little bit darker.
Yeah.
But back then I still had like flaking going on there. So that wasn't 100%. On my elbows, I still had some flaking. So when I first came back to Minnesota, I think if I had a say in it, if I didn't have the funding, I would have waited until I didn't have anything left anymore. But since I had to go back, basically the flares started slowly, just starting in those places that hadn't 100% healed in a way. And then they started to spread, and then they became worse and worse. So that's how it started. And then it came back when I was at my worst. It came back on my foot, actually, which that had never happened before. Yeah. So I think kind of the steroids just might just go down into different places, or it might have just been that kind of what I said about the friction that I hadn't done for like 2 years on my foot. Then maybe that just kind of like irritated my skin and it made it come there. So it's really hard to say without studies, but as I mentioned before, it didn't come back as bad. So to answer your question, I didn't have as bad oozing as the first one. I had some oozing, but it didn't get to the point where I couldn't see or like I couldn't move. Also, my flexibility, I will still get the scabs in kind of like those general places that I showed before. But I had flexibility. Before, if I tried to move my arm, the crust will break, and then I would have to restart. This time, I also had those crusts, but I was able to move. So that tells me that the layers in my skin, it wasn't affected as deeply. It was more superficial. Okay. Also, a lot of my lesions. So where I had the open skin, there was a lot of blood this time, and also it was a lot more itchy. So that tells me that it was also more of the superficial layers, since there was blood vessels. It was also more itchy because it was nerve endings there. So that's how I could tell that this flare, even though it looked bad, it was not as bad as the first one. I also got over it a lot quicker. Okay.
Were you ever full body flaring?
People ask me that a lot, and I have a hard time answering that because I do have different lesions in different parts of my body, but I never had I never been like red all over my body. So I guess it goes into definition. I've had lesions like all over my body, but I've always had like big patches, like my whole chest has been healthy, that kind of stuff. So yes, I've had it like all over my body, but I haven't had it like full body where I get red and how you see in some people. I've never had it that way.
Yeah. I never did either, which thank goodness, but it's interesting. So when you were going back, I'm just curious as a side note, when you knew you had to go back to Minnesota, do you believe there was like an emotional, mental stress that began just knowing you were going back to a place where you already had experienced bad skin?
I knew it was there. And I mean, it's really easy to tell people to like, oh, like, you know, it's going to happen anyway. So why like stress out about it? I mean, there's just no way that I feel like there's no way you just can't stress about this thing. So yeah, under all of that, there was probably some stress. And then you have to add into that also the stress of just going back to school, taking classes, taking tests, and then having to interact with all these people while maybe you're going to get as bad as before. So that builds more stress. So it could also be that maybe Minnesota itself, maybe it's not the weather, maybe it's not what's happening there, or maybe it's just that I just stressed out of having to go back to school, that kind of stuff. So that's why we need studies, because there's just so many things going on that you just don't know.
Yeah, I feel like in my own experience, there's definitely an element that is mentally, emotionally charged that's triggered, you know, some part of it. But so this time around, this flare, you decided to go a different route. And we have interviewed Dr. Olivia, who is a Chinese medicine doctor out of Chicago, who's worked with many of our board members and different community members. And so I've interviewed Dr. Olivia. She's talked very much about traditional Chinese medicine therapies and remedies. So we've kind of got that in the ITSAN background as far as like from a doctor's perspective, but from your perspective, Rafa, how did you choose it as your choice this time, your strategy, and how'd you find your doctor? And then just tell us, you know, what the process looked like, because it, you know, it can sound very much like drink this and try this, and it gets a little like, you know, you're worried as you start to consume all these other things and your body's doing so many different things. So why'd you choose it this time? Why traditional Chinese medicine?
Yeah, so first of all, I trusted this practitioner just because my girlfriend is the one that suggested her to me. And I know that she had some other health problems and she was able to help her, whereas everything else had failed as well for that. So that's one of the biggest points of why I decided to go through it, just because it was somebody that I really trusted.
Okay.
And also, I also did a lot of background reading, kind of like the differences, the similarities of like Western medicine compared to the Eastern one. I read that Eastern is more like holistic. It looks kind of like everything in the body, kind of like interactions of everything that's going on, environmental, kind of where you are, that kind of stuff. Whereas in Western, it's more like focal. Yeah, that's kind of like the just background reading. Mm-hmm. And another reason is because before I started doing NMT, I was already going to see this acupuncturist. And back then I wasn't very sure, because it was kind of like at the point where I had just started seeing her. And then I feel that with TCM, a lot of things, kind of how you mentioned, is that like, oh, take this, like, oh, that's not working, now take this. So now that I've gone through the process and that I learned more about it, read more about it, so that process needs to be there, because it's kind of like a process of elimination for what I went through with her. There's different herbs that do different things that affect different systems. So when you come into a practitioner, you don't know almost anything about them. They don't know almost anything about you. And that's why they kind of have to like give you all these different things to see what works for you. Because I mean, as most of us know, going through TSW, we have different potency, we live in different places, we have maybe different kinds of eczema, we have different diets. So that's why that process happens, and that's why they have to find something specific for you. So back then, that's why I kind of just stopped doing that, because I wanted something fast, and it was too slow for me at the time. So that's why I stopped. Okay. But now that I came back, and the second time, I wanted something that was slower, that didn't make me flare really fast. And that's when I looked into TCM, and that's why I decided to do that, because that's a lot more, it's not aggressive. When I was talking to her, she was saying that that's a lot, we're just trying to come back into balance. It's not as aggressive, it's slow, and it's gentle on your body. It always needs to be gentle, and that's kind of what I needed for school, because I didn't want to be flaring all the time. So that's my biggest decision of why I decided to do TCM this time.
Okay. And so, and I love that you said, you know, it's about finding someone you can trust. I mean, always, you know, it's that we definitely don't want the guessing, but I know Dr. Olivia talked a lot about just fire in your body and heat in your body. When you went to this doctor for Chinese medicine therapy, did she understand TSW, or did that not really matter? It was just more of like, you have systems that are being impacted.
No, so what I really liked about her too, coming back to that trust, is that I told her everything that kind of happened to me. I showed her the pictures that I showed you. I told her about my decision to do NMT. I told her what that was, what I went through. I also told her about TSW, and she was just really open, and she was just hearing all of my concerns, everything. She never told me like, you have to take this or you're not going to get better. She always listened to what I had to say, and everything that I had to say, she took into account. Mm-hmm. Talking about kind of like the fire thing, she was telling me that my body was really inflamed from the inside, kind of like the fire one. So one of the things that she had me do actually was I used to eat a lot of peppers. Just being from Mexico, that's kind of like a staple in our cuisine. Mm-hmm. So she told me that I had to stop doing that, just because that kind of added to the inflammation, because kind of since it's so hot, peppers, all that kind of stuff. That's why I needed to stop taking that. And even up to today, I'm still not eating peppers, because every 2 weeks I give her a call, tell her what's going on, and I ask, can I eat peppers still? And she's still like, oh, let's wait a little bit. So, but I'm going on the 10 now.
What did you start with? So was it diet first of all? And you get the packets of herbs, like the bags of juice or tea, whatever, and you drink it, or is that what it looked like?
Yeah, so I think the first thing was diet. That was the first thing that we had to tackle. And then after that, we started looking into herbs. And then how this will happen is that she will make me an herb package to kind of like counteract my symptoms. So she will ask how much, if I'm able to sleep at night, if I'm having trouble sleeping, kind of like how my diet is, how my bowels were doing. So that's kind of how it works, on how she will give me herbs to try to combat those symptoms. And then at the end of those 2 weeks, she will give me for like 2 weeks herbs. And then at the end of those 2 weeks, I will come back and tell her what happened, if they worked, if they didn't. If it worked, then that's good. We can continue with those herbs. And then if they didn't work, maybe we will try something else. And also we will combat the symptoms that I had at that specific time. So when I was really flaring, when I had like blood on my foot, I couldn't walk too well. There were really specific, she gave me specific herbs to kind of counteract the inflammation, also how wet it was since I had some ooze. So I will get specific herbs specifically for that. And then once those symptoms finished, and then I went into kind of like the drier phase, then the herbs will change to kind of counteract those symptoms. So the way I see it, and again, I'm still fairly new and I don't understand it too well. She just gets different clues from my symptoms of what's going on my body, and then she tries to basically bring my body to balance, kind of how I am now, by using these herbs. And then as my symptoms change, she uses different herbs to kind of bring me closer and closer to a balanced state, which I will say I am at right now.
And how long you're still doing this, but now more?
I started back in April. So this was towards the end of when I was almost gonna get back to Texas. Okay. So that's when I started, April, May, June. So actually it wasn't that long. It was 3 months of herbs. And then as my symptoms changed, I got different herbs. And actually right now I'm probably a month without herbs. I'm not taking any herbs. I'm still doing the diet, but that's usually the goal, the end goal, to be able to stay in balance without the herbs, because just by the fact of using herbs, that's kind of outside of you. The goal is to just have your body keep you in balance by itself. But if your body needs help all throughout the process, that's why she gives the herbs.
Was the diet kind of a generic diet that might help other people? I mean, is it like, this is a diet that's good for TSW in general?
No, I wouldn't recommend the diet that I have for other people, again, because people have different allergies, people have different genetics. And then I think if you are going to try to do TSM, it's really different from NMT. Whereas NMT, you have this specific protocol that tells you need to follow this, this, and this, and this. For me personally, I see TCM as almost kind of the opposite, where you have to be working really closely with somebody that kind of knows what they're doing. They're able to find what works for your body, and then they have to have the knowledge of these different herbs, these different diets, and how they interact with your body. So that's why I wouldn't recommend kind of what the herbs. Some people ask me like, oh, what herbs did you take? And I can't recommend them, because I mean, something that might be beneficial for me might be harmful for somebody else, just based on what they're going through. So
yeah, and I definitely think that we got that same idea from Dr. Olivia, who said, it's a very personal treatment. It's definitely not something you can just say, I'm going to do it and just go figure it out on your own. But the biggest thing I think was trusting somebody who would really be able to, who knows what they're doing, knows what the herbs are. So with the NMT versus the TCM. I'm just curious. I know NMT kind of things look worse before they look better. With TCM, do you feel like you just like progressively were just like better every 2 weeks and better every 2 weeks? Did it just keep getting better?
Yeah. So with my experience with TCM, it was that as soon as I started going with her, things did start getting better and better and better. But again, I was in really close contact all the time, every 2 weeks going in there. So yes, that's the way I saw it. And just to be fair to NMT, I think if you're in the hospital with Dr. Sato, kind of how I was with my practitioner, I think it will look similar in that you're just getting, well, I think you're going to have that you're getting worse, but I think you're also, as soon as you get over that little hump, you're also going to start seeing better just because you have somebody there with you that knows what they're doing and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I appreciate and like how you said, you know, with whatever treatment you're going to do, it's that research. You know, TSW is definitely one of those conditions that you want to do your own research so you believe in what it is that you're trying and you know how to monitor and assess whether or not it's working or not working for you, you know, for how long. But it's awesome to hear, you know, that you've done 2 pretty non-traditional treatment types so far, protocols. And I would say TSW, one of the things that's, it's kind of like TCM's out there working with a naturopath, NMT, and then doing normal Western medicine, which would be something like, you know, immunosuppressants, prescription drugs, maybe to help you get through some of the symptoms. And like at ITSAN, we always say, you know, there is not a treatment protocol that we recommend or suggest because everybody kind of has to figure this part of the journey out in the way that you know best to do. You haven't chosen Western medicine, Rafa. Is there a reason? Is that because of giving up the steroids and not trusting anymore in your doctor? Or it seems like that would be the most natural place to start, would be with your medical doctor. You didn't start there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people might have a similar thought process going into this. It's just that steroids just got me to such a low point where I just cannot trust any other method that's similar to it, like cyclosporine. I feel like it's really similar to steroids. So all of these different methods are just really similar to it. And also just the way that I'm kind of like evolving, even like spiritually, I find that I always wanna, if I can, I wanna find something that I can have my body kind of do on its own. So that's why I kind of gravitated toward NMT, where it's, you just don't take anything, you let your body do it. And then also TCM, where you're getting herbs that are from plants, that there's nothing synthetic, nothing. So it's also natural. That's kind of why I gravitated over there. But I think there's also, I think we have to remember also for Western medicine, I think there's also certain points where you might also need to look into cyclosporine, all of these different methods, because even with my TCM practitioner, when I got to her, I was fairly bad. I wasn't nearly as bad as last time, but I was fairly bad, where she told me that if we couldn't get my symptoms under control with the herbs, that it was probably a good idea to go back to steroids to kind of like, what do you call it? Basically bring me back to a stable level where she could work with me. So I think people that go into cyclosporine steroids, I don't think they should be bad about having come to that decision, because sometimes you just need it. But I think it's also a good idea to maybe start looking at other methods. And I think that's what most people do. They go into cyclosporine hoping that they can get out of it and then go into something more natural. Yeah, that's kind of just my frame of mind whenever I look at these different methods and just what I've done. I haven't gotten to the point, well, you could make the case that maybe I should have come just to how bad it was, but that was me being stubborn and just trusting the process too for NMT.
Yeah, I respect everything that you just said so much, and I can relate to it. I think, you know, one of the hardest things about using Western medicine is one, the lack of trust, because you're told over and over to just continue your steroids, but it's also hard to find a doctor that, you know, doesn't just, you know, it's like the ultimate goal when you're withdrawing from steroids is to heal your body. Yeah. And so, and at the same time, I can tell you, you know, almost 8 years into my TSW journey, that when I look back now at some of those worst times, if I had had doctors who could have recommended or given me something, you know, I'm talking about the times when you're bedridden and you haven't slept for months and your whole body hurts, you know, the really bad flares, especially at the beginning, you know, I may have chosen some different things. At the time, I didn't have a Western doctor that could support me in that. And so I probably suffered, you know, many people can relate to that. But at the same time, I don't know that, you know, now in hindsight, could I have done it a little bit easier? Could I have tapered a little slower? Could I, you know, there's so many, could I have done these things? And so I think the most important message is like, whatever treatment you choose, you have to believe it. And I mean, even when you went through and you told the story of your NMT, you know, I was like, there's no way I could do it. You know, that for me just didn't resonate as what I could do. Although I did it for certain, you know, a month at a time. And, you know, I have the pictures to tell that story, but, you know, it's like, we all have to commit to your body, kind of call it spiritual knowing, you know, your gut instincts, whatever it is, but you kind of know what you have to do. And at the same time, that's why, you know, I think all of us will say, you have to choose, and don't ever feel guilty or, you know, bad about choosing a remedy that somebody else might choose. If there's a specific, you know, treatment, prescription drug that works for you, do it, because the end goal here is for all of us to heal and come out of this living our best life, you know, our most healthy, best life. And so how you get from point A to point B is completely personal. And that's why I love interviewing people like you, because it just shows us, you know, you could say NMT all the way, and then here you are a year later, you were doing TCM, you know? And so I think all of us have kind of found our way through different ways of healing. And, you know, it's just, am I healing? Am I getting where I want to be? And do I feel good about that choice for my body? So I'm curious now, before we start to wrap up, how much of your life do you feel like you're still, like, what percentage of your time are you still worrying about your skin, dealing with your skin? You know, even if it's little stuff, is it like, oh, I got to take my lotion out before I go, I got to eat this thing? Or do you eat something and go, dang it, I just ruined it? Like, how often do you feel like you're still having skin in your foresight?
Yeah, so I think this changes over time, just having been 3 years in and trying different methods, going through flares. I will say that kind of like the amount of time that I spend thinking about my skin follows pretty well, kind of like my flare cycle, obviously. So when I'm flaring, most of my time I'm thinking about my skin, what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong. As I keep getting over the flare, the percentage of time that I'm thinking lowers, and the percentage of time that I'm doing other stuff that doesn't matter too much increases. At this point in time, where I basically have nothing going on, I'm not even thinking about my skin anymore. I mean, I'm not supposed to be eating dairy. Sometimes I'm eating spicy food too. I'm eating ice cream. And I think this is just normal for people. It's just not there anymore. And also, I think right now, I feel really comfortable with any. So I think this also happens once you go more into TSW for some people. I feel really comfortable with any subsequent flare that I might face, just because I've already gone through it twice. I tried a method for the first flare. I tried a different method for the second flare. So I feel like now I have a structure in place. I have a support system. I have NMT if I really need it. I have my TCM practitioner that I apply. I think if I start experiencing a new flare, I'm probably gonna go to her first, because I feel like she'll be able to give me some herbs or something to be able to curb that the best. And if I do get another flare, that's kind of like what I'm thinking of doing. So to answer your question, I think right now I'm almost not even thinking about it, just because I already have something in place in my mind that I feel like I'm going to do if something does pop up. Whereas I could not say that when I'm first going into my first flare and I just came out of it, because there's just so many unknowns back then. So
yeah, well, congratulations. That's where we all want to be. I feel like, you know, I feel like with my skin and my face especially, it's still a constant, you know, there's still not that natural, which there's periods of it where it'll be completely gone and I feel really, really normal, but it's been a while where I feel like I'm still in that, you know, you can't wear makeup, you can't, you know, things just aren't as normal as you want them to be. So skin's still an issue, but not nearly as bad as it has been in the past. So you're a ray of hope. And now on your personal pages, are you still posting about it or not so much anymore?
Yeah, I'm still posting about it, but obviously since I've gone back to school, I have a lot of less free time. It's definitely slowed down. So right now I'm in the process of cataloging my second flare. Right now on my Instagram, I'm kind of building up to like when I'm getting my second flare. I still hadn't gotten to the point where I got really bad. So yeah, I'm still doing it, just not as frequently. So but I do talk a lot about this kind of stuff. I don't do it as frequent as a lot of other people, since I just do it kind of when I have free time. But I think there's still a lot of good information there for people that are looking for anything TSW related. So yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing with us your update and also staying connected, because I know that I go through waves of like, I don't want to talk about skin anymore. I don't want to see people with skin. I don't want to talk to people who are hurting with skin. You know, I get to which are my own low points probably, you know, when my own skin is struggling. I'm like, I want away from this so much. So but it's good to see for anybody that, you know, watches or views this, that you do come through and you do heal. I mean, neither of us are anywhere near. I've seen your original pictures and mine have been out there too, just, you know, what this looked like from the beginning. And do you feel like you can live your normal life now?
Yeah, actually right now I feel like I can live my normal life, but then COVID's out there. So it's been kind of frustrating. So first it was a silver lining, and now that I'm getting better, I'm like, oh, that COVID. Whereas like a few months before, I was like, yeah, COVID, like I can just be at home.
I know. There's many people who have made comments about, well, not so bad I have to wear a mask, you know, there's things I'd like to cover up anyhow. So yeah, I said, I wish years ago everybody would have worn masks. It would have helped me not look so different. But well, that's really good to hear, Rafa. Please stay in touch with us and on the, you know, Facebook private page. If there's questions in there, if you could check in and answer those. You know, this is exactly, yeah, people are writing, like, you look so good, so encouraging. People do want to know who your doctor is. So if you want to just message people back on that. And then Rafa, if you would email, just send an email to me again, and I'll get it to Jolene, one of our board members who keeps a list of doctors. And anybody who is seeking a doctor, if you email info@itsan.org, one of our board members, Jolene McDonald, will help you get connected with somebody who is either in your area or who is can do telemedicine. So your doctor does telemedicine, you said?
She does what?
Telemedicine, your TCM, does she do medicine over the phone or?
Oh, I know she did that with me. I know she was local, which is why I think I'll need to ask her if she will be open to doing it.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure she would. But I'll ask her and then I'll get back to you. And then if she says yes, you can add her on it. I just haven't asked her yet, so that's why I'm not comfortable sharing that.
Yeah, no problem. Perfect. Yeah. So we'll get that information. And then, like I said, for anybody who, I know we have Dr. Olivia, we've got, you know, ITSAN has a list of doctors who will help through telemedicine if you're not local. So reach out to info@itsan.org and Jolene will help you with that. And then I just wanted to give a couple of ideas out there in the Facebook world. I know we never recommend products or anything, but as a veteran warrior, these things have helped me a ton. So if you ever get to that itch where you just want to go crazy with it, I found this little face roller and I'm loving it just for moving lymph drainage a little bit. This feels really good. And then you guys, I found them one night, you know, when you're in desperation in a flare and you're on, Amazon on your phone in the middle of the night when you should be sleeping. These are called facial wands. And you put these in the freezer. Estheticians use these. And so instead of, if you're an ice pack person for any part of your body, if you're like, oh, I need ice packs, and you know how you get that burn and then they get warm too fast. These are like these steel wands. And I just went on Amazon and looked up facial wands, but they stay cold. I've had these out the whole time we've been talking, and they're still so cold, and you just move them on your skin. They feel really good. So, you know, one of the things we deal with is our blood vessels being wide open. They're not constricting as they should. So this really helps, especially if you get out of a hot shower or bath or summer day. After I go on my walk, I just take those face wands and it just like really cools my face down. So that's something that's helped. And then ladies, if you lose your eyebrows, little tip, dye them, okay? Makes your whole face look and feel so much better. Go get your eyebrows down and put a little tint in them. I promise you it helps so much. Rafa's like, I don't know what you're talking about, but if you lose your eyebrows or your hair like I have, that's just a great thing that I discovered. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have eyebrows again that you can actually see and you don't have to put your makeup on. So there you go, ladies. They're my little tip of the day. But with that, Rafa, if you'll check in on any questions there, and then we'll post this recording. It was funny, a lot of the people that we're gonna watch on the Zoom today, they're not in the private Facebook group. I thought everybody was in this page. So we'll make sure we post it out there on our website and stuff to make sure everybody can find us. So can find the link to it. So Rafa, thank you so much. I really, really genuinely appreciate that you reached out and said, hey, can I share another way, another bit of my experience, another bit of my story, because we all are looking for that, those rays of hope. So thank you so much for doing it.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to do it just because, again, I see a lot of like, this method works best, this one works best. Like, I just want people to know that, I mean, there's all of these different things you can do, and there's nothing wrong you can try. This is your personal journey, and you shouldn't just trust people when they say like, this is the only thing that works, this is the only thing that works. A lot of different things can work, and you just do your research and then do what you think is going to work best for you, for your specific particular moment in this time. That's why I've done two different things, because I was just at two different places doing those flares. So yeah, and thank you for having me. Yeah. Yes,
absolutely. You're always welcome. Please stay connected to me and to ITSAN. I love hearing you. And I think Rafa ended that just perfectly. Remember that ITSAN does not suggest or recommend any particular protocol, but I think what Rafa just said is trust yourself, trust your knowing, do your research, and ask those of us that have already gone through this, you know, talk to people who are going through and understand what TSW is, because there's a ton of help out there for you. So, all right, everybody, we wish you well. Happy August 2020. It's a new month, and hopefully our world and our condition continues to get more awareness, more healing, and better days ahead. So Rafa, be well. You look good. You look really, really good. It's good to see you. You look like a little embodiment of sunshine, and so I'm going to channel some of that energy too. And I wish everybody out there very well. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.